What's up, YouTube? This is True Raw for TV. Before I get into this video, I want to remind you guys, as always, that if you're watching or listening to this video and you haven't subscribed to True Raw for TV, please subscribe to True Raw for TV. If you haven't hit that notification bell, please hit that bell so that you'll be notified of any and every video that drops on this channel as soon as it drops. And also, if you like or at least appreciate the content on this channel, please hit that like button. That will help not only my channel, but other channels in the LDBC that you're subscribed to. And that'll make us that much stronger in the Lions Den basketball community. Now and also, if you want to show love for True Raw for TV, you can do so via the PayPal or the Cash App. I think anybody and everybody that has donated and supported my channel the past couple months. And also, if you want to support True Raw for TV, you can also do so via the Patreon. On the Patreon, for only $2 per month, I'm able to talk about things that I can't talk about on YouTube, and subjects I can't talk about on YouTube. I can go in like I want to on Patreon, unlike on YouTube where, they want to censor us. I put it like that. Now, this video was suggested by Scorpio. Shout out to Scorpio. He suggested I should do a video talking about Walt Bellamy. I think it's a good idea. Now, if you're not familiar with Walt Bellamy, no, Walt Bellamy didn't just die. Walt Bellamy actually passed away 6 years ago. Surprised it's been that long ago, but he passed away 6 years ago, back in 2013. And he was 74 years old, and his death was rather shocking and surprising. Because I remember just refreshing reading about his obituary. He'd actually attended the opening season game just a couple days before he passed away for the Atlanta Hawks. So, he lived in the Atlanta area, and he played the last quarter or so of his career with the Atlanta Hawks. And I'll bring up the Hawks again in a moment. I think his jersey should be retired by them. But I'll get back to that in a moment. Walt Bellamy is one of the most underrated basketball players and one of the most underappreciated centers in the history of the NBA. Some of it has to do with the era that he played in. He played in the era that was dominated by Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell, and later on by guys like Willis Reed and Wes Unseld. Nate Thurman even overshadowed Walt Bellamy. Walt Bellamy could be a little bit inconsistent at times, but for the most part, he was a great, great center. If I had to compare him to any center, uh, as far as his performance is concerned, it would possibly be Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing is one of the great centers in the history of the NBA, but nobody would really consider him at any point in his career the best center. You know what I'm saying? At the beginning of his career, you had Moses Malone. I'm talking about Ewing. You had Moses Malone, and Kareem was still doing things, even though he was clearly not in his prime anymore. You had Kim Olajuwon, you had David Robinson, then of course you had Shaq. And these guys just tended to overshadow Patrick Ewing. But Patrick Ewing was a great center in his own right, and you could say the same thing about Walt Bellamy. Now, Walt Bellamy attended college in Indiana with Indiana University. Of course, that's the same school that would have many other NBA greats as far as in their history as well. Of course, the first person that pops in my mind is Isaiah Thomas, and I believe also Mark Aguirre, I think, came from there, or was it DePaul where Mark Aguirre came from? Can't remember right now. But anyway, Walt Bellamy still holds a lot of records for Indiana that still stands today, which is most rebounds in the season with 649, most double-doubles in a career with 59. Remember, this is when they didn't measure blocks. So any game where Walt Bellamy had blocks, like 10 blocks or so, it wasn't really counted. and he holds a seasonal record for most highest rebounding average at 17.8 rebounds per game. In the year 2000, Walt Bellamy was selected to the Indiana University's All-Century team. In his final collegiate game, he set Indiana and Big Ten conference records that still stands to this day, 60 years later, with 28 points and 33 rebounds. All right, he was named an All-American in both his junior and senior years, and in the 1960 Olympics, he was part of that historic Olympic team that's comparable to the '92 Dream Team, which consisted of Hall of Famers Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, and a player that's maybe a little bit lower tier, but still was a great player, in Terry Dischinger. All right. And Walt Bellamy was part of that team. Walt Bellamy went on to be selected first in the NBA draft, and he was selected by the Chicago Packers. And the Chicago Packers would go on to become the Baltimore Bullets. And then, of course, they relocated to Washington. And, of course, they changed their name in 1997. They became the Washington Wizards, the team that we know now. But back then, they were the Chicago Packers. And I know, yes, that name sounds a little gay. You know, I'm a little bit sophomoric in how I look at things too. But the Packers selected him, and he had one of the greatest rookie campaigns in the history of the NBA. He averaged 31.6 points per game for the Packers. Michael, grow up, man. He averaged 31.6 points per game for Chicago, which is the second highest scoring average for a rookie in NBA history behind Wilt Chamberlain's 37.6 points per game. And his 19 rebounds per game were third all time for a rookie behind only Wilt Chamberlain's 27 rebounds and Bill Russell's 19.6 rebounds per game in his rookie campaign. Um, Also, since 1961-62, no rookie has surpassed Walter Bellamy's 973 made field goals during that year. It's an interesting story about Walt Bellamy too. You know, like I said, he had this historic campaign, and he was being compared to Wilt Chamberlain and all these different things. And this goes to show you the greatness of Wilt Chamberlain. I got to bring this up. When they first played each other uh, that season, Wilt Chamberlain met Walt Bellamy, and he shook his hand mid-court and said to him something to the effect of, "You're not going to score in the first half of this game." And during the first half of that game, Wilt blocked every one of Walter Bellamy's. I agreed to say Bill Bellamy. I know Def Jam's how to be a player. He blocked every one of Walt Bellamy's shots, and then he proceeded to probably, I think he scored like almost 30 points in the first half himself. And then in the second half, he said, "Okay," he told Walt Bellamy, "now you can score." And I think Walt went on to score like maybe like 16 or 18 points in the second half. And Wilt Chamberlain, I think, finished with like 50 or 60 points. But I just wanted to bring that up to show you how great Wilt Chamberlain is. But people tend to say he's overrated. Oh, well, whatever. But anyway, one of the knocks on Walt Bellamy is that he had such a historic rookie campaign, but yet his numbers just sort of dropped off toward the rest of his career. And yes, while Walt Bellamy could be a little bit inconsistent at times, just a little bit, um, the main reason for that is because as his career went on with the Packers, and especially after he was traded to the New York Knicks, is that his teams got better. You know, his rookie year, they were, I think, the worst team in the NBA. But by the time he was with the New York Knicks, he was playing with guys like Willis Reed and later on, of course, uh, 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 Walt Frazier. So he didn't need to put up 32 and 20 anymore. Now he could put up, 19 points and 11 or 12 rebounds. And also, unlike certain stat patterns that we have in the NBA today, that's what happens. Usually, when you're playing on teams that have more talent around you, you don't need to shoot the ball as much. Are you listening, James Harden? But ultimately, when he played the New York Knicks, Red Holzman became the coach of that team. He had to make a decision. He had to make a decision as to who his big man was going to be. And ultimately, Red Holzman felt that Willis Reed would be a better fit for his team over Walt Bellamy. Walt Bellamy was not a guy who had the greatest outside shot. He was not a great passing big man. Um, he was a big man that could score in the paint. He was a bruiser. He could block shots, some shots, and he was a rebounder. And Walt Bellamy was big guy, 6'11". Uh, at the time, probably like 235, 240. Um, and Willis Reed was a little bit younger, so they went with Willis Reed and traded Walt Bellamy to the Detroit Pistons in exchange for Dave DeBusschere and might be some other pieces involved, but they were the main pieces. And it was that year, I believe, when he was traded from the Knicks to the Pistons that Walt Bellamy set a record, and that was most games played during the season. I think the Pistons had a lot more games left in their season remaining than the Knicks. Schedule differential or whatever. But he wound up playing 88 games that year, and that's a record that I don't think will ever be broken. Um, Walt Bellamy, kind of was in the wilderness for a while with the Pistons. They were a horrible team, and they didn't really do much. He, you know, put up some numbers, but for the most part, he floundered a little bit with the Pistons. But he had a renaissance when he was traded to the Atlanta Hawks for the last five or so seasons of his career. He played the most games of his career with the Atlanta Hawks. 338 games of his 1,043 games were played with the Atlanta Hawks. And during his tenure with the Hawks, he averaged nearly 16 points, over 12 rebounds, and nearly 3 assists per game on 51% shooting from the floor. And with his tenure with the Hawks, he helped them along with Pete Maravich and Lou Hudson. They went to the playoffs 4 consecutive years before he retired for good early and during the 1974-75 NBA season. Now, Walt Bellamy, for his career, averaged 20.1 points, 13.7 rebounds, and 2.4 assists per game. I think when he retired, he was the NBA's sixth all-time leading scorer and like the fourth or fifth all-time leading rebounder or something like that. So when he retired, he was much higher on the all-time list. All right. My thing with Walt Bellamy is this. I think the Atlanta Hawks seriously need to retire his number. I agree with Scorpio. Now, if you guys remember, I did a video years ago, might have been like 4 years ago, where I said that the Atlanta Hawks need to retire Pete Maravich's number. All right. Ultimately, they did do that. They did. At the time, it was only three numbers that had been retired. At the time, it was just Sweet Lou Hudson, may he rest in peace, Bob Pettit, and Dominique Wilkins. The Hawks were really stringent on jersey retirements. Since then, they've retired Pete Maravich and Dikembe Mutombo. I think that they need to retire also Walt Bellamy, Bells. He was a main contributor to those playoff teams. All right. He was a fixture in Atlanta for many years. He's been a big contributor to Atlanta, Georgia area up until his death. All right. I think that they need to retire his number. Um, you can make a case. Also, I'll just mention this that they probably should have retired Cliff Hagan's number, but Cliff Hagan was, I think it's a political reason why they haven't retired Cliff Hagan's number because the numbers are sufficient for him to have a jersey retired. But Cliff Hagan was a clear racist. All right, he was a racist. He conspired to have black players removed from the then St. Louis Hawks roster. It was a lot of stuff with Cliff Hagan. All right, and that's one of the reasons why I think Cliff Hagan's jersey, I think it's what number 16 hasn't been retired. I think it's number he wore. But Walt Bellamy, I do believe that the Atlanta Hawks should retire his number. Um, but Walt Bellamy is one of the best players in the history of NBA. One of the best players. And like I said, a lot of people don't know about Bells. Centers aren't really, for the most part, centers are not really valued, you know, today as much as they used to be. It's more perimeter guys now, but like I said, this is a guy that was very durable for his NBA career. He averaged 37 minutes per game. He was always amongst the league leaders in field goal percentage. And Walt Bellamy, a four-time All-Star. Um, for the rest of his career, he was not an All-Star, but that was not really his fault. The center position was loaded at that time, but he was one of the better centers in the history of the NBA. And I think the Atlanta Hawks should retire Walter Bell's Bellamy number. Okay.